The sun dipped low over Asheville, casting a warm golden hue across the living room, where I sat with my coffee, staring at the vibrant art on the walls. Each piece told a story, much like my own life, a tapestry woven with threads of joy and regret. I had spent the last 2 decades building a stable life with Mark, my husband. Our home was filled with laughter and memories, but lately, something had shifted. Jake, Mark's nephew, had moved in after his college graduation. He was young, ambitious, and full of dreams. His presence was meant to be temporary, a bridge between adolescence and adulthood. Instead, it became a catalyst for feelings I hadn't anticipated. I found myself stealing glances at him more often than I should have, his laughter echoing in the hallways lingered long after he left the room. I shook my head as if to dispel those thoughts. Focus on your marriage, Catherine. That was my mantra these days. Mark had always been supportive and understanding, he deserved my loyalty. Yet every time Jake entered the room with that easy smile or when he helped me cook dinner in our cramped kitchen, I felt an unsettling flutter in my chest. One evening, while I was folding laundry in our bedroom, Jake knocked lightly on the door before stepping inside. He held a small envelope in his hand, a note he had written for me. My heart raced as he handed it over. It felt like receiving a love letter from a secret admirer. "I thought you might want this," he said softly. I opened it cautiously. The words spilled out like whispers of unspoken feelings, admiration for who I was as a person and an acknowledgement of our growing connection. My breath caught in my throat as I read his confession, a mix of gratitude and longing that sent shivers down my spine. Jake, the word barely escaped my lips before I swallowed hard. "I shouldn't have said anything," he replied quickly, his cheeks flushing as he turned away to leave. "Wait," I called after him. But he was already gone, leaving me alone with the weight of his words. In that moment, everything felt precarious, like standing on the edge of a cliff with no safety net below. My heart raced not just from fear but from an undeniable thrill that came with exploring emotions long buried beneath layers of routine and responsibility. Later that night, Mark returned home from work earlier than usual. His face lit up when he walked through the door. It was one of those rare moments when everything felt right in our little world. "I have a surprise for us," he announced enthusiastically as he set down his briefcase. "What is it?" I asked cautiously, still reeling from Jake's note. "A weekend getaway. Just you and me," Mark said with an infectious grin that reminded me why I fell in love with him all those years ago. "Really? When?" The excitement bubbled within me despite the knot forming in my stomach. "This Friday. We'll head to the cabin by the lake," he replied. "Just think, no distractions." The words hung heavy between us as images of Jake's note flashed through my mind like neon signs warning me to tread carefully. A weekend alone with Mark felt like both an escape and a trap, an opportunity to reaffirm our bond or confront what simmered beneath the surface. As we settled into bed that night, I tried to push aside thoughts of Jake and focus on Mark's warmth beside me, the familiar comfort of marriage enveloping us like a favorite blanket. But sleep eluded me as visions danced behind my eyelids, moments shared with Jake, the laughter during family dinners and casual conversations that lingered longer than necessary. I tossed and turned until finally succumbing to exhaustion around dawn. In those fleeting hours of sleep, dreams tangled together, my heart divided between loyalty to Mark and an inexplicable connection to Jake that refused to fade away. The next morning brought sunlight streaming through our bedroom window, a new day filled with possibilities yet overshadowed by uncertainty. As I prepared breakfast while Mark readied himself for work, tension hung thick in the air like fog rolling over the mountains outside our home. "Are you excited about this weekend?" Mark asked casually over coffee as if nothing could disrupt our plans. "Yes," I replied too quickly before forcing myself to add more sincerity into my tone. "It'll be nice to get away." He smiled knowingly, Perhaps he sensed something amiss but chose not to press further, an act of trust that made guilt gnaw at me even more fiercely. After breakfast ended too soon for comfort, Mark kissed me goodbye before heading out into another busy day at work, a routine we both relied upon yet now felt fragile against this new undercurrent threatening our stability. I stood alone in silence once again, the house quiet except for distant sounds filtering through open windows. Birds chirping outside mingled with echoes from nearby streets bustling with life beyond these walls where secrets stirred restlessly within me like shadows refusing light. As noon approached without distraction from chores or errands calling out for attention outside this cocoon we'd created together over years past, I found myself wandering toward Jake's room down the hall hesitantly seeking clarity amid confusion swirling around emotions no longer easily defined nor contained within boundaries drawn long ago by choices made under different circumstances entirely removed from this moment now unfolding before me unexpectedly yet undeniably so real. With each step closer came rising tension coiling tight within. What would happen when confronted face to face? Would clarity emerge or would it deepen conflict already brewing beneath surface smiles exchanged during family dinners? Before knocking softly on his door, I paused instead listening intently hoping for signs revealing intentions hidden deeper than mere surface interactions suggested thus far. But then again, how could one ever truly know what lay beneath layers built carefully over time without risking everything held dear? The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting soft patterns across the room. I moved quietly, careful not to disturb my husband, who lay still beside me. The weight of my thoughts pressed heavily on my chest. The upcoming trip loomed over me like a storm cloud, threatening to unleash chaos I wasn't prepared to face. Jake had been unusually attentive lately. Each shared glance felt charged with unspoken words, each brush of our hands igniting a spark I desperately tried to extinguish. I busied myself with packing for the trip, folding clothes with a fervor that belied my inner turmoil. The vibrant fabrics seemed to mock my attempts at normalcy. As I rummaged through the closet, I stumbled upon a forgotten sweater of Jake's, left behind during his last visit. My fingers lingered on the soft fabric, memories flooding back, his laughter echoing in the kitchen, our conversations stretching late into the night. A pang of longing shot through me, and I quickly shoved it back onto the shelf. "Hey," Jake's voice broke through my reverie as he stepped into the room. He looked disheveled yet charming in his casual attire. "Need any help?" "No, I've got it," I replied too quickly, avoiding his gaze as I turned back to my task. He moved closer, and the air between us thickened with tension. "You sure? You seem preoccupied." I forced a smile, trying to mask the turmoil brewing inside me. "Just thinking about our trip." "Yeah." His tone softened as he leaned against the doorframe. "I hope it'll be good for you too." The sincerity in his voice made my heart race. It was moments like these that blurred the lines of propriety and pulled me deeper into an emotional labyrinth from which there seemed no escape. "I'm sure it will be," I managed to say while folding another shirt. Jake stepped forward again, this time closing the distance between us. "Catherine," he hesitated before continuing, searching for words that hung heavy in the air. "What?" My heart thudded against my ribcage as he reached out and brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. His touch sent shivers down my spine, a reminder of how easily everything could unravel if we let it go too far. "I just want you to know that if you ever need someone to talk to." The moment stretched out like an elastic band ready to snap. Our eyes locked, and suddenly all thoughts of loyalty faded into insignificance against this burgeoning connection pulsing between us. Inexplicably drawn together by forces beyond our control, our lips met in a fleeting moment that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Just as quickly as it began, we pulled apart, gasping for breath like we had surfaced from deep water. The reality crashed over me like a wave. What had we done? "I shouldn't have," Jake stammered, stepping back as if burned by fire. No, I whispered urgently, panic rising within me. We can't do this. His expression shifted from surprise to understanding, a shared recognition of how fragile our situation truly was. Before either of us could say more, my phone rang sharply from across the room, slicing through the tension like a knife. The sudden intrusion jolted us both back into reality. Sorry, I muttered hastily as I grabbed it off the nightstand without looking at the caller ID. Hello? A voice on the other end sent chills down my spine, my sister-in-law's frantic tone cutting through any remaining calmness in my heart. Catherine. You need to come over right away. It's about Mom. My stomach twisted painfully at her words. Family emergencies had a way of appending everything else in life, even feelings one tried so hard to suppress. I'll be there soon, I said before hanging up abruptly. Jake watched me closely as realization dawned on him. This wasn't just an ordinary call, something serious was happening back home. I have to go, I said hurriedly while shoving items haphazardly into my suitcase without thought or care. Do you want me to come with you? His voice held concern mixed with hesitation. He understood how complicated things had become between us but still wanted to offer support. No. The word escaped before I could temper it with gentleness. Fear gripped me at what might happen if we faced this together right now, especially after what just transpired between us. He nodded slowly but didn't move away from where he stood, the silence thickening around us once more as unspoken words lingered heavily in the air. I'll call you later, I promised weakly before darting past him towards the door. Every step felt like an anchor dragging me deeper into chaos rather than clarity. As I drove towards my parents' house, the familiar streets of Asheville blurring by, I couldn't shake off thoughts of Jake in that brief moment we shared. Guilt gnawed at me relentlessly despite knowing that family came first now more than ever before. Arriving home felt surreal, the usual comforting atmosphere replaced by tension hanging thickly around every corner like shadows creeping closer than they should have been allowed near light. My sister-in-law met me at the door. Her eyes were red-rimmed from worry but held no judgment, just fear for what lay ahead regarding our mother's health issues looming over all of us now like dark storm clouds gathering strength above our heads waiting patiently until they'd burst forth uncontrollably upon unsuspecting lives below them once again. Thank you for coming. Her voice trembled slightly as she ushered me inside. Immediate concern replaced any lingering thoughts about Jake or what might happen next between us both here within these walls filled with memories long past now overshadowed by uncertainty looming ahead. The air in the house felt heavy, thick with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. I watched my sister-in-law as she moved about the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared coffee. The familiar aroma filled the space, but it did little to ease the tension that had settled between us. My mind wandered back to Jake, his presence lingering like a shadow in every corner of my thoughts. Do you think she'll be okay? I asked, breaking the silence that had enveloped us since I arrived. She paused, glancing at me with a mixture of hope and despair. I don't know. The doctors say it's just a matter of time. Her voice cracked, and I could see how hard she was trying to hold herself together. I nodded, trying to focus on her words rather than the whirlwind of feelings swirling inside me. Jake's laughter echoed in my mind, moments shared that felt both innocent and charged with something deeper. Would he be affected by this family crisis? Would he retreat into himself or reach out for comfort? As we sipped our coffee in silence, I couldn't shake the thought of him wandering around our home while we dealt with this heaviness. It was as if he was a part of both worlds, my stable family life and this new, uncertain emotional landscape that I found myself navigating. Are you okay? My sister-in-law asked suddenly, breaking my reverie. I forced a smile. Just tired from the drive. She studied me for a moment before nodding slowly. You've been through a lot lately. The weight of her words hung between us like a fragile thread ready to snap at any moment. I wanted to confide in her about Jake, how he made me feel alive again, but fear held me back. What would she think? What would everyone think? Later that evening, after dinner with my husband, I found myself alone in our bedroom. The house was quiet except for the distant sounds of crickets outside and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. My heart raced as I thought about Jake being just down the hall, so close yet so far away. I tried to push those thoughts aside as I settled into bed beside my husband. He turned off the bedside lamp, casting us into darkness. Sleep came slowly. My mind kept drifting back to moments shared with Jake, the laughter over silly jokes and quiet conversations that felt too intimate for mere family ties. Just as sleep began to claim me, I heard a soft knock on our bedroom door. My heart leaped into my throat as it creaked open slightly. "Hey," Jake whispered from the shadows. My breath caught. "What are you doing here?" "I couldn't sleep," he replied softly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. He stood there for a moment, his silhouette framed by moonlight streaming through the window, before crossing over to sit on the edge of our bed. My pulse quickened at his proximity. There was an undeniable pull between us that felt both thrilling and terrifying. "What's wrong?" I asked cautiously. He hesitated before answering, his gaze fixed on his hands resting on his knees. "Just thinking about everything, about your mom." The mention of my mother brought reality crashing back down around us like a heavy blanket suffocating any spark igniting between us. "Yeah, it's hard," I murmured. In that moment of vulnerability, something shifted between us, a silent understanding that transcended words hung in the air like electricity waiting to spark into flame. "We should talk," he said finally, lifting his eyes to meet mine. I nodded slowly but felt torn between loyalty and desire, a battle raging within me as his presence filled every inch of space around us. This wasn't just about attraction anymore, it was about connection and emotional longing that threatened to unravel everything I held dear. Our conversation flowed easily at first. We spoke about family memories and shared experiences growing up together under one roof until those familiar topics began morphing into something deeper, a reflection on ourselves and what we truly wanted out of life. Then came an unexpected moment when he leaned closer. The warmth radiating from him enveloped me like sunlight breaking through clouds after a stormy day. And suddenly our lips met in an impulsive rush fueled by all those unacknowledged feelings bubbling beneath the surface for far too long. The kiss was electric but fleeting. Reality crashed back down around us almost instantly as we pulled away from each other, eyes wide with shock at what had just transpired between us. "I shouldn't have done that," Jake breathed out heavily as if trying to convince himself more than me. "No, neither should I." My voice trembled slightly with fear and confusion mingling together inside me like an intricate dance spiraling out of control. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity before he finally broke it again. "I can't stop thinking about you." His confession hung heavily in the air between us, a declaration laden with implications neither one of us was ready to face fully yet still clung tightly onto like lifelines thrown into turbulent waters threatening to drown us both if we weren't careful enough not to get swept away entirely by temptation's tide, rising higher each passing moment spent together now. Suddenly footsteps echoed down the hallway, my husband returning home earlier than expected from running errands. And panic surged through me like ice-cold water splashing against bare skin on a frigid winter morning, catching everyone off guard, completely unprepared for what lay ahead next. Jake's eyes widened in alarm as he quickly slipped back toward the door without another word, leaving only uncertainty lingering behind him. Hanging thickly within these walls were secrets brewed beneath fragile facades carefully constructed over years spent building lives, intertwined tightly together, now threatened by choices made recklessly amidst chaos unfolding all around them, threatening everything they once knew. As soon as he left, dread settled heavily upon my chest. Guilt twisted painfully inside while grappling desperately, trying maintain some semblance stability amidst turmoil brewing just beneath surface, threatening erupt unexpectedly at any moment, forcing choices upon all involved whether they were ready or not. The days passed slowly after that night, each one dragging on as I tried to navigate the shifting tides of my emotions. I kept my distance from Jake, focusing on mundane tasks around the house, trying to immerse myself in the familiar rhythm of my life. My husband, Mark, seemed oblivious to the tension that had settled between Jake and me. He was busy with work and preparations for the upcoming family gathering. I busied myself with cleaning and organizing, hoping that physical labor would distract me from the emotional chaos swirling inside. Yet, every time I caught a glimpse of Jake in the kitchen or heard his laughter drifting down the hallway, my heart would quicken against my will. The connection we shared felt undeniable, a magnetic pull that grew stronger even as I fought against it. The night before the family event, exhaustion weighed heavily on me. I collapsed into bed early, hoping for sleep to wash away my worries. But sleep eluded me as memories of our intimate moments replayed in my mind like a haunting melody. The warmth of his body beside mine lingered in my thoughts. We spent the night together, an innocent act wrapped in layers of complexity that left me feeling vulnerable and exposed. As dawn broke through the window, casting soft light across our room, I lay there wrestling with my thoughts. I had avoided confronting what was happening between us for too long. Guilt gnawed at me like a persistent itch that refused to fade away. The family gathering loomed closer with every tick of the clock, intensifying my anxiety. Mark woke up early as usual, stretching and yawning before turning to me with a smile that felt both comforting and suffocating. "Big day today," he said cheerfully, unaware of the storm brewing within me. "Yeah," I replied softly, forcing a smile back at him while internally battling waves of doubt and fear. He mentioned needing help setting up for dinner later and casually suggested inviting Jake to lend a hand too. My stomach twisted at the thought of being alone with him again amidst family members who would be watching closely. "Sure," I said hesitantly, trying to mask my discomfort. As Mark prepared breakfast in the kitchen, I stepped outside for some fresh air, hoping it would clear my mind. The crisp morning air filled my lungs as I wandered into our small garden filled with blooming flowers, a beautiful distraction from reality. But even nature's beauty couldn't quell the turmoil within. I spotted Jake coming down the path toward me. He must have heard Mark moving around in the kitchen too. "Morning," he greeted me with an easy smile that sent shivers down my spine. "Morning," I replied cautiously. He leaned against a fence post casually while looking at me intently as if searching for something unspoken between us. "You okay?" he asked softly. "Just thinking about today," I managed to say without revealing too much of what churned inside. "I get it," he replied quietly but didn't elaborate further. Instead, his gaze lingered on mine longer than necessary, an unspoken understanding passing between us. We stood there in silence for a moment before Mark called out from inside about breakfast being ready. It broke our moment like glass shattering on concrete. As we gathered around the table later that morning, Mark chatting animatedly about his plans for dinner, I found myself stealing glances at Jake who sat across from me engaged but distant. A strange mix of comfort and tension hung thickly in the air. After breakfast concluded and dishes were cleared away by Mark's insistence, he loved having everything tidy. I found myself alone with Jake again while Mark stepped out briefly to grab supplies from our car parked outside. The moment felt electric. We were standing just inches apart in our cozy kitchen filled with sunlight pouring through windows illuminating every corner where shadows once lurked. "I can't keep pretending this doesn't exist," Jake murmured, suddenly breaking through silence like thunder rolling across distant hills. "What do you mean?" My heart raced at his words laced with urgency. It felt like stepping onto shaky ground uncertain where it might lead. "This, whatever this is between us, we can't ignore it anymore." His voice was steady yet vulnerable, a stark contrast to how chaotic everything felt inside me right now. Before I could respond or process what he was saying further, Mark returned carrying an armful of supplies, interrupting our moment once more. reality crashing back down upon us like waves crashing against rocks, eroding them slowly over time until nothing remained but fragments scattered across shores, forgotten by all but those who dared venture close enough to witness their beauty hidden beneath turbulent waters, churning endlessly beneath surface calmness, masking deeper truths waiting patiently beneath layers built over years spent together, fighting against odds stacked high against them. As we prepared for guests arriving later that evening, the atmosphere grew tense again despite efforts made by everyone involved trying maintain normalcy amidst chaos brewing just beneath surfaces threatening erupt unexpectedly at any moment, forcing choices upon all involved whether they were ready or not. I couldn't shake off feelings swirling within, nor could escape consequences looming ahead, waiting patiently until they revealed themselves inevitably when least expected, catching all off guard, leaving them grappling desperately, trying to understand what had happened, how everything unraveled so quickly, spiraling out control beyond anyone's grasp. With guests arriving soon, it felt like time slipped away faster than ever before, leaving no room left for contemplation, only action needed if any hope remained salvageable amongst wreckage left behind, shattered dreams scattered across paths once traveled, now lost forever. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow on the countertop where I stood, chopping vegetables for the family gathering. The air was thick with tension, a palpable reminder of the secrets swirling around me. Jake's presence loomed large in my mind as I tried to focus on the task at hand. My husband, Mark, was in the living room, organizing chairs and setting up for our guests. "Need any help?" Mark called over his shoulder, his voice light and cheerful. "No, I'm good," I replied, forcing a smile that felt more like a mask than genuine happiness. The weight of my emotions pressed heavily against my chest as I worked. The invitation extended to Jake for today's event felt like a double-edged sword. On one hand, it provided an opportunity to confront my feelings in a familiar setting. On the other, it threatened to unravel everything I had built with Mark. Guilt gnawed at me as I thought about how easily things could spiral out of control. I caught myself glancing toward the hallway leading to Jake's room. He had been quiet lately, retreating into himself after our last encounter, the one that left me questioning everything about my life and choices. My heart raced at the thought of him, his laughter still echoed in my ears from those stolen moments we shared. As I continued chopping, my mind wandered back to that night when we spent the night together. It was an innocent enough evening until it wasn't, until emotions took over and blurred lines were crossed. The memory sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't afford to let it happen again. Suddenly, laughter erupted from the living room as Jake entered carrying a box filled with decorations for the gathering. His presence lit up the space in a way that felt both comforting and dangerous. He smiled at me, and for a moment everything else faded away. "Need help with those?" he asked playfully. "I think I can manage," I replied softly, hoping he could sense my hesitation. Mark joined us in the kitchen just then, clapping Jake on the back with an easy camaraderie that made my stomach twist with unease. "Perfect timing. Let's get this place ready before everyone arrives." As they began unpacking decorations together, I found myself retreating into my thoughts once more. The tension between Jake and me was like an electric current. One wrong move could ignite something explosive and irreversible. The doorbell rang unexpectedly, jolting me from my reverie. "I'll get it," Mark called out cheerfully as he headed toward the door. My heart raced again as I exchanged glances with Jake. We both knew that this gathering would be different than any other we had hosted before. As Mark opened the door to greet our first guests, a couple from down the street, I felt a sense of urgency rising within me. Time was slipping away faster than ever before. While Mark busied himself with welcoming guests and making small talk, Jake leaned closer to me while arranging flowers on the dining table. "Everything okay?" he whispered softly so only I could hear. "Just trying to keep it together," I murmured back, forcing myself not to look directly into his eyes for fear of losing control entirely. The gathering unfolded around us, a mix of laughter and chatter filling our home, but all I could focus on was how close Jake stood beside me. Each brush of his arm against mine sent sparks flying through my veins while guilt curled tightly around my heart like a vice grip. I caught snippets of conversations floating through the air, talk about upcoming vacations and family plans, but none resonated with me as much as what lingered unspoken between Jake and me. Then came an unexpected moment. While helping set up drinks in the kitchen away from prying eyes, Jake turned toward me suddenly with an intensity that made my breath catch in my throat. "I've been thinking," he started but hesitated when footsteps approached from outside. "Uh-oh," he said instead as Mark entered carrying another tray of snacks. The moment passed like smoke dissipating into thin air. Reality crashed back down around us both. Throughout dinner preparations and conversations filled with laughter echoing through our home, every glance exchanged between Jake and me felt charged with unspoken words. Words that could change everything if voiced aloud amidst family members unaware of what danced just beneath surface-level pleasantries. As plates were filled and stories shared around our dining table later that evening, the room buzzing with life, I found myself stealing moments alone where possible. Stepping outside onto our porch briefly or sneaking into quiet corners where shadows masked lingering thoughts too heavy to bear openly among friends and family gathered close together yet feeling worlds apart emotionally. In one such moment, standing alone under starlit skies, breathless beneath vastness above, I heard footsteps approaching behind me before turning slightly only to find Jake standing there watching quietly without saying anything at all. "What are you doing out here?" he finally asked softly after what felt like hours spent in silence together under moonlight illuminating paths toward choices ahead, uncertain yet undeniably present between us both now more than ever before. "I needed some air," I replied honestly, though part of me craved far more than just fresh air. It longed for clarity amidst chaos swirling around us all tonight, threatening stability built upon years spent nurturing relationships now hanging precariously by threads woven through shared histories intertwined deeply within lives lived side by side until now. Just then laughter erupted from inside again, a reminder of reality crashing against dreams lingering just beyond reach, and suddenly all fears resurfaced anew. What if someone noticed? What if Mark sensed something amiss? My heart raced wildly as uncertainty flooded every corner of my mind, battling against instinct urging caution. Jake stepped closer still until mere inches separated us under stars shimmering brightly above, casting shadows across faces illuminated softly by moonlight, tension thickening, palpably hanging heavy between us, now fraught with danger yet alluringly enticing too. Before either one could speak again, however, a voice rang out, cutting through silence, shattering fragile moment shared abruptly. Mark calling from inside, asking where we had disappeared off to, leaving everything unresolved hanging precariously above us, waiting patiently still for answers long overdue. The night air was thick with unspoken words, and I could hear Mark's voice calling from inside the house. It pulled me back to reality, away from the moment I had shared with Jake. The warmth of his presence lingered, but I couldn't afford to dwell on it any longer. I turned toward the house, feeling a mix of dread and anticipation. "Coming?" I called back, my voice slightly shaky. As I walked back inside, the weight of my emotions pressed heavily on my chest. The family gathering loomed closer, and every passing moment felt like a countdown to an explosion waiting to happen. Inside, Mark was in the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water. He looked up as I entered, his brow furrowed in concern. "Where were you? You disappeared for a while." "Just needed some fresh air," I replied, trying to keep my tone casual. My heart raced as I thought about Jake standing just outside under the stars. "I didn't mean to worry you." Mark nodded but didn't seem convinced. He studied me for a moment before turning back to his glass. The tension hung in the air like an unwelcome guest, and I could sense that he had noticed something off between us. I busied myself with preparing snacks for our guests tomorrow, attempting to distract myself from the chaos brewing within me. But no matter how hard I tried to focus on cutting vegetables or arranging cheese on a platter, My mind kept drifting back to Jake and what we had almost crossed into. After finishing in the kitchen, I decided to step outside again for a moment of solitude. The night sky was still clear and peaceful, the stars twinkling like distant memories of happier times before this mess began. Sitting on the porch swing, I let out a deep breath that felt like it carried all my worries into the night. As I swayed gently back and forth, my thoughts turned toward Jake's hidden photo that had altered everything for me earlier that week, one where he looked so carefree and happy beside his late mother at the lake during summer vacations long ago. It struck me how much he resembled Mark when he was younger. Both shared that same mischievous smile that lit up their faces. But there was something else about Jake too, a depth that drew me in like gravity pulling at my very core. It made me question everything about what had been happening between us lately. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Mark stepping out onto the porch with an unreadable expression on his face. "You okay?" he asked softly. "Just thinking," I replied evasively. "About what?" His gaze bore into mine as if searching for answers hidden beneath layers of pretense. I hesitated for a moment before deciding against sharing too much. After all, honesty might lead us down paths we weren't ready to traverse yet. "Just life," I said finally. Mark sat down beside me on the swing and sighed deeply as if some burden weighed heavily upon him too. "You know you can talk to me about anything," he offered gently. I wanted nothing more than to confide in him, to spill out all my fears about Jake in this emotional turmoil, but something held me back, a fear of shattering our fragile stability even further than it already was. Instead, we sat in silence for several moments while crickets chirped around us, their chorus echoing through our shared unease until finally breaking it with Mark's voice again. "I've been thinking about family lately." His words caught my attention sharply, they were heavy with meaning beyond mere small talk. "What do you mean?" He paused as if weighing his thoughts carefully before continuing, "About how important it is, how sometimes we overlook things until they're right in front of us." A chill ran down my spine at those words. They felt ominously prophetic given everything happening between us right now, especially concerning Jake living under our roof. Before I could respond further or probe deeper into what he meant by those statements, Jake appeared at the edge of our property line, illuminated by porch light casting shadows over him like ghosts haunting this very place where memories lingered uncomfortably close behind every corner. "Hey. Sorry if I'm interrupting," he called out cheerfully despite clearly being aware of our conversation moments prior. Mark straightened up immediately while shifting his focus toward Jake, who approached cautiously, his body language suggesting he sensed underlying tension too but chose not to acknowledge it outright. "Not at all," Mark replied smoothly, though there was an edge lurking beneath his calm facade which made my heart race again. It felt like watching two opposing forces collide without knowing which side would prevail ultimately when everything came crashing down around us eventually. Jake joined us on the swing, now facing both sides equally as if trying hard not to favor either one of us too much, an attempt perhaps at keeping things balanced even when they felt anything but stable deep down inside, where emotions swirled chaotically, still seeking resolution somehow amidst this tangled web we found ourselves ensnared within. "I thought maybe we could play some cards later," Jake suggested casually, trying hard not to betray any hint towards underlying tension lingering thickly between all three of us now. An invitation meant solely for distraction from reality perhaps, but one that left me feeling unsettled nonetheless, regardless whatever intentions lay behind those words spoken so lightly. "Sounds good," Mark replied quickly before glancing sideways toward me expectantly, waiting silently for affirmation from my end too, while uncertainty bubbled beneath surface, threatening eruption anytime soon. As darkness enveloped us further outside, I sensed time slipping away faster than ever before, leaving little room left for decisions needing made soon enough, especially with gathering approaching fast, looming dangerously close ahead. Tomorrow would bring more than just family together. It would force confrontation whether wanted or not, pushing boundaries tested beyond limits already reached previously without warning, leaving aftermath uncertain yet inevitable regardless, whatever choices lay ahead waiting patiently just out of reach still. The morning light crept through the curtains, casting soft patterns across the room. I lay there, tangled in my thoughts, heart racing as I replayed the events of the night before. The family gathering loomed closer, and with it, the weight of my decisions pressed heavily on my chest. The air felt thick with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. As I glanced at Jake, sleeping peacefully beside me, a rush of emotions surged within me. He had become a part of my life in ways I hadn't anticipated. Each moment spent together had deepened our connection, blurring lines I once thought were clear. I was torn between two worlds, the stability of my marriage and the raw intensity of what Jake represented. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake him. The house was still, save for the distant sounds of birds chirping outside. I made my way to the kitchen, seeking solace in the familiar routine of brewing coffee. The aroma filled the air as I attempted to gather my thoughts. My husband would be up soon. He always rose early to prepare for his day at work. This morning felt different though, charged with an energy that hinted at impending confrontation. What would happen when everyone arrived? Would I find the courage to voice what had been simmering beneath the surface? The sound of footsteps broke my reverie as Mike entered the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He greeted me with a warm smile that momentarily soothed my anxiety. "Good morning," he said cheerfully, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Morning," I replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. He chatted about mundane topics, the weather, plans for dinner later, but each word felt like a reminder of how far apart we had grown. My mind drifted back to last night's conversation with Jake, the way he had looked at me when we spoke about our dreams and fears. In those moments, it felt like we were two souls connected beyond circumstance. "Are you ready for today?" Mike asked suddenly, breaking through my thoughts. "Of course," I replied automatically. "Just family stuff." He nodded but didn't seem convinced by my facade. A flicker of concern crossed his face before he masked it with casual indifference. It was as if he sensed something was off but chose not to press further. As we moved through breakfast in silence, I stole glances at Jake's closed bedroom door down the hall. What if he came out? What if our secret was exposed? My heart raced at the thought, anxiety mixed with an unexpected thrill. After breakfast, Mike headed out for work while I began tidying up around the house. With every passing hour leading up to the gathering, tension built within me like a coiled spring ready to snap. Memories flooded back, each stolen glance and whispered confession shared with Jake replayed vividly in my mind. Just as I finished cleaning up in the living room, there was a knock at the door, a familiar sound that sent shivers down my spine. It was Jake. He had arrived early to help set up for the gathering. "Hey," he greeted me with a bright smile that warmed my insides despite everything else swirling around us. "Hi," I managed to say while trying to keep my expression neutral. We fell into an easy rhythm as we worked together, hanging decorations and arranging furniture, but beneath it all lay an undercurrent of tension neither of us could ignore. Each brush against his arm sent sparks through me, each shared laugh felt laced with something deeper than friendship. As we sat up in silence for what felt like hours, Jake finally broke it by turning towards me with an earnest expression on his face. "Are you okay? You seem distracted." "I'm fine," I replied too quickly, avoiding his gaze while folding tablecloths nervously. "You know you can talk to me about anything," he said softly. His words hung in the air between us like an unspoken promise, a lifeline amidst chaos threatening to engulf us both. But could I truly risk everything by opening up? "I just have a lot on my mind," I admitted cautiously while glancing towards him again. Jake stepped closer, Our proximity heightened every nerve ending in my body as he searched my eyes for answers only I held within myself. "What are you thinking?" he pressed gently but firmly as if daring me to reveal what lay beneath layers of doubt and fear. "I'm thinking about today, about everything." My voice wavered slightly as vulnerability took hold over rationality once more. Before another word could escape either of us, a car engine roared outside, followed by laughter echoing from friends arriving early for our gathering, not just family but people who knew nothing about this internal struggle tearing at me from within. Jake stepped back abruptly as if jolted awake from a dream where perhaps we could have explored these feelings without consequence or judgment, looming overhead, threatening ruin upon everything we cared about most deeply yet hesitated ever acknowledging fully aloud. The doors swung open, revealing family members bursting into our home filled with joyous energy, a stark contrast to what churned inside me now, like storm clouds darkening skies overhead, ominously looming over this fragile moment where choices awaited their turn, demanding attention. As guests filtered into our space, chatting animatedly amongst themselves, unaware of turmoil brewing beneath surface, smiles plastered across faces, pretending normalcy existed here still despite secrets whispered only between shadows cast upon walls surrounding us, tightly holding truths hidden away, carefully tucked behind closed doors, never meant see light again until now, threatening break free, utterly uncontained. I watched from afar, trying hard maintain composure amidst chaos unraveling rapidly around us, when suddenly Mike caught sight something amiss between Jake and myself. His brow furrowed slightly, betraying concern lingering unaddressed, festering quietly just below surface, waiting patiently for chance reveal itself fully. In that split second, realization struck hard. Whatever path chosen next would irrevocably alter lives forevermore, leaving scars etched deep into fabric, relationships woven together intricately over years spent building, foundations strong enough withstand storms yet fragile enough break apart entirely should winds shift unexpectedly without warning. And then there it was, a moment suspended in time where decisions hung delicately poised above reality, waiting breathlessly for someone brave enough step forward, take leap, faith into unknown abyss lying ahead, promising danger yet freedom intertwined inseparably forevermore. The air thickened with tension as the gathering unfolded around me. Laughter echoed through the cozy home, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within. Each cheerful voice felt like a reminder of the life I had built, yet every glance towards Jake ignited a flicker of something I couldn't ignore. My heart raced, caught between two worlds that were destined to collide. As the evening wore on, I watched my husband move from guest to guest, his laughter genuine but his eyes occasionally darting toward me. I could sense him searching for signs of my internal struggle. The weight of his trust pressed down on me, suffocating and heavy. How could I maintain this facade when every shared moment with Jake felt like a betrayal? Jake stood across the room, engaged in conversation with one of my friends. He was charming and easygoing, effortlessly drawing people in with his laughter. But it was the way he looked at me, those moments when our eyes met, that sent shivers down my spine. Each glance was electric, charged with an unspoken understanding that only deepened my conflict. I excused myself from a group discussing trivial matters and slipped into the quiet of our bedroom, seeking solace in familiar surroundings. The walls held memories of love and warmth, but now they felt like barriers keeping me from what I truly desired. As I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind raced through what-ifs and maybes. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. It was Jake, stepping inside as if he had been waiting for this moment all evening. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing us away from prying eyes and ears. "I needed to see you," he said quietly, his voice low and urgent. My heart thudded louder in response to his presence. "We shouldn't be doing this," I whispered, though every fiber of my being longed for connection. "Doing what?" "Talking?" He stepped closer, urgency lacing his tone. "Catherine, we can't keep pretending there's nothing between us." The intensity in his gaze made it difficult to breathe. Memories flooded back, our stolen moments filled with laughter and shared glances that lingered too long. "What do you want from me?" My voice barely broke through the silence that enveloped us. "I want you to choose," he said simply. "Choose?" The word hung heavy in the air between us as reality crashed back in waves, my husband's laughter echoing downstairs, our life together hanging by a thread. Before I could respond, footsteps echoed down the hall followed by voices approaching the door, a reminder that our secret could unravel at any moment. Panic surged through me as I glanced toward the door. It felt as if time slowed down. "Jake!" I hissed urgently, stepping back instinctively. He moved forward again, closing the distance between us until there was barely space left for doubt or hesitation. The air crackled with unspoken words and emotions swirling around us like a storm ready to break. Then came another knock at the door, this time more insistent, and before I could process what was happening next, it swung open revealing my husband standing there with confusion etched across his face. In that split second before words formed or actions took place, everything shifted dramatically. The atmosphere thickened with an impending confrontation that felt unavoidable yet surreal. "What's going on here?" His voice cut through the tension like a knife. Disbelief mingled with anger flashed across his features as he took in our proximity, the unintentional intimacy radiating between Jake and me. My voice faltered under scrutiny. Every possible excuse evaporated into thin air under his gaze. Without waiting for an explanation or any semblance of reason to settle between us, his expression twisted into one of betrayal. I saw him take a step forward towards Jake who stood frozen beside me, shock evident on both their faces as realization dawned painfully clear upon them both. "Get out!" My husband's voice boomed through our quiet sanctuary, a command infused with hurt and rage directed at Jake rather than at me initially. But it didn't matter because everything shifted irreparably now regardless of who bore responsibility for this chaos unfolding around us. I watched helplessly as Jake turned towards my husband, a mixture of defiance and regret playing across his features. But before any words could escape either man's lips, a surge of adrenaline propelled them both into action. Fists clenched tightly ready for confrontation fueled by emotions they couldn't fully articulate yet felt deeply nonetheless. And just like that, the world around me shattered into fragments reflecting choices made amidst tangled lives woven together over years spent building something beautiful now threatened by shadows lurking just beneath surface appearances. The sound resonated sharply, a collision echoing throughout our home-filled moments once cherished now tainted irrevocably. And suddenly all those years spent nurturing bonds became overshadowed by uncertainty looming ahead threatening to redefine everything we held dear. In that instant, I stood paralyzed caught between two men whose lives would never be the same again regardless if reconciliation followed or if paths diverged irrevocably forevermore.